The big four QBs in the AFC get a lot of attention, rightfully so, even Justin Herbert and CJ Stroud. But those teams better be careful because Sean Payton is building an army of assassins in Denver, and they just might sneak up on you. Welcome, everybody, inside the top 10 of my power rankings heading into this next season and of my deep dive series. This is the home stretch, baby. Today, we take a deep dive into the Denver Broncos, one of the surprise teams of last season, looking to take another step forward this year. Lots to discuss. Thank you for joining us here today. And before we do get started, if you could please take just a second to hit that like button down below. It really does help me out. And make sure you're subscribed. Now inside this top 10 countdown, you're not going to want to miss our remaining 9 deep dives after this. And as always, with every chapter of this series, we go position by position and start the conversation asking if that group got better, worse, or stayed the same. And that begins here in this video as we discuss the coaching staff in Denver. And no major changes with this Broncos coaching staff, not enough for me to say downgraded or anything like that. But they do lose some key assistant coaches. John Morton, their passing game coordinator on offense, will be headed to Detroit to be their new offensive coordinator, along with Declan Doyle heading eastward to the NFC North, who will be the offensive coordinator underneath Ben Johnson in Chicago. He was their tight ends coach here in Denver last year. So some names climbing the ranks, leaving Sean Payton's coaching staff, which tends to happen when you do as good of a job as Sean Payton did last season and has done early in his Broncos tenure here. What a season the Broncos had last year after nobody or close to nobody was picking this Broncos team to go to the playoffs last year, especially after Payton's first year in Denver was, let's just say, rocky with Russell Wilson. I think it was at least assumed it would take a little bit with a rookie quarterback, with Bo Nix coming in for this team to reach the playoffs. No, Sean Payton gets it done. They go to the big dance. They do fall short, but an impressive season nonetheless. And I think Sean Payton deserves a ton of praise here and frankly deserves to be discussed yet again where he was when he stepped away from New Orleans as one of the premium top 5 head coaches in the NFL, where I do now have Sean Payton reclaiming those ranks as my 5th overall head coach for this series. Needless to say, the Broncos are in very good hands with him at the helm here, and their creative decision to trade for him, trading a first-round pick for him to New Orleans, also justified in his early successes here in what will hopefully be an extended tenure here in Denver for Sean Payton. And that is all reflected in these key coaching rankings that I give to these teams in this series. Not just the 5th ranked head coach overall, but this team ranks as high as 6th for that overall coach and culture ranking, the sort of benefit of the doubt slider that these teams earn. And then for the offensive coaching rankings, they rank 5th to 8th for pass game coaching and 3rd to 7th for run game coaching. While there are definitely some incredible younger offensive minds bringing a lot of new principles to the table in NFL offenses, Sean Payton has been able to keep up and apply a lot of things like RPOs into his own playbook and his offense and keep up with a lot of those top dogs from a offensive coaching perspective in this league. So we start on a good note there with Sean Payton as the head coach. I do want to talk a little bit about what his scheme looks like here in Denver. I think many of us remember the Drew Brees offenses that we saw for the better part of a decade in New Orleans, really highlighted by the quick passing game, using quick game and bubble screens as an extension of their run game to spread defenses out and utilize some of those kind of modern spread principles in that offense in New Orleans. And those core philosophies do exist here in Denver. But I do think the use of the RPO game is something that Sean Payton has really studied and kept up with the times on. Those run pass options where you're reading out a linebacker or a defensive end or doing all these different ways to put defenses in a bind where you can either hand the ball off or flick that ball out. We've seen a lot of that in Denver, and something Bo Nix did very well at Oregon as well. So that's probably been the creative extension of the Sean Payton New Orleans offense, but something that Sean Payton, I don't think, ever got enough credit for, probably because they were such great passing games with Drew Brees there, was the run game and how well Sean Payton is able to coach the run game. He runs a very balanced pro-style run game under center that really gets into all of the different running concepts that you can use to attack defenses. He'll go pin and pull, power right at you. He will lean into wide zone when he feels it's appropriate. Inside zone, duo, counter, trap, jet sweeps, you name it. Sean Payton is really good at studying his opponent that week, understanding the fronts he's going to get, and then coaching his guys to be well equipped to come out and run whatever is going to work that week. And while this team did actually have some on and off struggles to run the football last year, their running back room was a unit that I think did kind of prove that, well, running backs do kind of matter to an extent. The vision of someone like Javonte Williams was a constant problem for this team. You saw a lot of blocks ready to go with open lanes that someone like Javonte Williams just wasn't able to hit, along with the other backs that now in this season will be featuring more backup roles. They were 24th in run game DVOA last year. To be fair, they were 13th in 2023 in that Russell Wilson-based offense. We still have to see like high-end top 10 run game results from Sean Payton here in Denver, but I do have a lot of confidence in them to get there at some point in time here because we have seen that from Sean Payton in years past with the New Orleans Saints. 2019, the Saints ranked 4th as a rushing offense. 2020, the Saints were 2nd as a rushing offense. So we have seen Sean Payton get his run games to exciting heights, and I do think a big priority for him is to get back to a lot of that here with this Broncos team. And then continuing to build off of really that quick passing attack on earlier downs, something he was able to lean into much more with Bo Nix as opposed to the skill set of like Russell Wilson. So ultimately, this is a coach and a scheme that has had so much success over the years. And I think last year, with this team ending as the 16th overall offense, very smack dab average there for a team with a rookie quarterback, not a ton of playmakers out there, continuing to develop and add with this group, developing underneath Sean Payton's wing. I think we are just seeing the beginnings of offensive success in Denver. Now, before we move over to the defensive side of things, we can at least mention Joe Lombardi as the offensive coordinator here. He has been Sean Payton's left-hand man for the better part of 13 years in New Orleans. He had a short-lived stint as the Lions offensive coordinator 2014 to 2015, and then an unremarkable stint as the Chargers offensive coordinator kind of right around the time Sean Payton left New Orleans. So, I don't think anybody's really eyeing Joe Lombardi as a head coach candidate or even to try to pluck him to call plays again as their offensive coordinator. He's kind of had that run. He's into his late 50s here, but certainly his experience working with Sean Payton, they have a good chemistry together, and things do work with Lombardi as his kind of co-star or maybe more of a supporting actor. But let's talk about Vance Joseph, who has emerged certainly as a co-star of this coaching staff. What a turnaround for Vance Joseph, who, Broncos fans were rightly after his head and his job as early as 2023, the beginning of Sean Payton's takeover here as the head coach. This defense sucked for the first 6-7 weeks of that 2023 season. But we started to see the writing on the wall with that defense just making some adjustments and playing so much better overnight. And then what a spectacular 2024 season for Vance Joseph in this defense that really was the identity of this Broncos team and the success that they had. This team does not make the playoffs as the 16th best offense without the defense that they had. A defense that, by the numbers, ranked as the number 1 run defense, the number 5 pass defense, and the number 4 overall defense. Really a special performance from that side of the ball. And with Vance Joseph, frankly, turning a corner here, I think he's still climbing in these coaching rankings. I have the Broncos as high as 13th for pass defense coaching and 14th for run defense coaching. Numbers that are lower than are probably warranted off the heels of last season. We'll see if they can repeat that type of performance again. If they do, we will be sitting here in next year's deep dive talking about Vance Joseph as one of the premium defensive minds in the entire league, potentially as a head coach candidate. But even if he isn't viewed as a head coach candidate, what an asset he is really emerging as for this Broncos team. And he is definitely a contribution here towards the Broncos being inside the top 10 of these final power rankings. Even if some Broncos fans might look at those coach rankings and say, that's still too low. Look, there are a lot of really great defensive coaches in the league. So there's a lot of big names for me to have Vance Joseph passing up here. Ultimately, I do have a ton of respect for the job he's doing here in Denver, and it is trending upwards as well. Now, as far as his scheme and what they're doing on that side of the ball, it's really, really fun. They honestly, I'll go there. They play defense like I think we all like to play in Madden. An analogy that may or may not hit for some of you people, but what I mean by that is they come out and they play about as much base, true 3-4 base defense as anyone in the league. They played the 5th most base defense with 4 defensive backs out there, the 3rd most base 3-4 out of anybody in the league. They blitz a ton, even on early downs, and they mostly just run cover 3 and cover 1 and then mix in different pockets of other coverages as a changeup, just to make sure you're not overly predictable. But about 65% of their overall coverage calls were either cover 3, cover 1, or cover 0, really bringing the heat. They ran the 4th most cover 0 out of any team in the league. So with a lot of guys in the box, playing aggressive, getting in your face, they want to stop the run on early downs so that they can get into 3rd downs. And that's where you see a lot of Vance Joseph's genius starting to shine through with the way that he's really, I don't know if evolved is the right word, because he's always ran relatively aggressive 3-4 style systems. He coached under Wade Phillips, who was great at designing blitzes. But he's certainly become more of a mastermind in terms of forcing confusion out of offensive lines, running twists and stunts, and just scheming up a pass rush where they do have individual pass rushers that really can win one-on-one and get after it. But a lot of times it's just overwhelming O-lines with numbers advantages and games mentally, causing blocking mishaps and phantom pressures where the offensive line is sliding towards an overloaded side, but it turns out you're actually getting blitzed from the other side and you've got the wrong numbers to pick it up. So getting to those 3rd downs, causing some of that confusion. And then it's not just blitzing. Like I said, it is showing blitz, but then just dropping back into coverages, running cover 2, cover 6, cover 4, but then oftentimes with some twists or guys showing at the line of scrimmage where guys might slide into eventual coverage droppers, you still might cause some confusion and create some of those free rushers as well. So yeah, Vance Joseph has really turned into a stud coach here. Their system and this defense is a ton of fun to watch, if not as fun to watch as anybody in the entire league right now. But before we do move forward, we're all big football fans here. But you know what has actually become really annoying is now needing 6 different subscription services just to catch all of the games that we want to see. And if you're anything like me, living a busy lifestyle, it can be overwhelming to keep track of what all you've signed up for, where your money is going, and where you need to go to cancel. Rocket Money is an easy-to-use, all-in-one finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and conveniently budget out all of your life's expenses. Once you link your bank account, the app will display all of your subscriptions in a single list. From there, you're just a few clicks away from canceling all of the subscriptions you no longer need or didn't even realize you were paying for each month. The Rocket Money app also makes budgeting a breeze. They automatically categorize all of your expenses so you know exactly where your money is going and where you might need to save some money. Honest truth here, after moving to Charlotte, North Carolina and back and buying a new home all within the last year, not exactly light life expenses, my wife and I felt such a weight lifted off our shoulders after we sat down with the Rocket Money app and took back control of our finances. So take back control of your finances today. Go to rocketmoney.com/TFG and you can get started for free. And a genuine thanks to Rocket Money for improving my life and for sponsoring today's deep dive. But let's now get into this Broncos roster. And we'll begin with the quarterback room. And first off, taking a look at their offseason changes. Staying neutral at quarterback, they do say goodbye to Zach Wilson, who came in and developed as QB3 last year, and they bring in Sam Ehlinger as a QB3 again this year. Obviously, staying neutral there, no significant changes as they continue to move forward with the young Bo Nix, their rookie first-round draft pick last year. And man, it was such a relief in a day that feels like these quarterbacks get to the league so often out of college and just either aren't as good as you think they are, or in some cases, areas that you think are strengths end up being weaknesses and vice versa. They just sometimes aren't the players you thought you watched in college. That wasn't the case with Bo Nix. He was exactly as advertised, and that worked perfectly fine for the Denver Broncos last year, especially for a rookie quarterback. And how I envisioned Bo Nix coming out was a very smart, rookie quarterback, someone that had started as many games in his college career as anybody, but someone that can certainly read defenses, take excellent care of the football, throw with good timing, relatively good accuracy, run the structure of your offense, play point guard, distribute the ball, keep your offense afloat, keep it running, be the conductor of the machine. He did all of those things brilliantly at Oregon, and with Sean Payton calling the shots here, he stepped in, and outside of an ugly week one performance that he had to brush off, he really hit the ground running after that and was as advertised from that point of view. But the other thing I really liked about Bo Nix that still led to me having a first-round grade on him coming out, because if all he was what we previously described, that's more of like a, point guard backup quarterback. But he actually brings stuff to the table as an improviser. He is so good at being that quarterback that he will read out his first read, make the most of it if it's open, but not force anything if it's not, and then create. He doesn't necessarily sit in the pocket all the time and pick you apart like Drew Brees did, going from read 2 to read 3 to read 4. I think that is something that very much can continue to develop from him as he learns this offense and works with Sean Payton. That will be the core thing to evaluate in terms of his upside, is if he can really just be that surgeon from the pocket. Right now, second and third read throws do come, but they come in more flashes, which was the case at Oregon as well, because Oregon just didn't ask him to go through a bunch of full field NFL type of progressions. What Oregon asked him to do was, hey, if it's not there, you're a great athlete. Remember who you were at Auburn, where you were all improv and no structure? He can resort to being that player where he sees the field really well outside of the pocket. He has a good pocket sense in terms of finding those escape lanes. I think he can at times be a little bit eager to get out of clean pockets. And that's really like what could take him from being how I think he projects here into year 2 as someone that should be a good tier 3 quarterback, something like a Brock Purdy or a Jalen Hurts, someone you can win a Super Bowl with in a perfect situation. If he can really kind of become that Drew Brees, elite mental surgeon of NFL defenses, that would be his path, I think, to even exceeding the expectations of what his ceiling might be as a quarterback. I'm not ruling out that as a possibility. It's just that that's not where we're at today with Bo Nix. But I do think with his ability to just make the most of what the play is designed to get you, if Sean Payton presses the wrong button and it's not open, Bo Nix can improvise, continue to take good care of the football in scramble drill, create throws out of structure, and then just scramble if need be. It's a really healthy setup that if the defense is playing at a top 5 level, if you get even better playmakers to get open on those first reads and create more after the catch, if they can run the football better, there is no reason that Bo Nix can't be something like we saw from Jalen Hurts last year. A Brock Purdy that got the Niners to the Super Bowl. I don't think we really need to sit here and dream up an unlikely scenario where Bo Nix becomes Joe Burrow, Tom Brady, Drew Brees. Theoretically, it's possible. Quarterback upside is always a challenging conversation because guys like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, can hardly move, and they're a pair of the best quarterbacks that ever played, right? Physical traits can get overrated at this position at times. But I do think Bo Nix is, at worst, a good NFL starter, absolutely projects to settle into that comfy 12 to 17 range of starting quarterbacks. Now, right now, I do still have him as the 19th ranked quarterback, just sniffing the surface of those rankings. The only reason for that is it's just coming off of one season. I am old enough to remember when we had very similar conversations as we just had about Mac Jones coming out of his rookie season. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Bo Nix. I don't think it will. But I do have a process here with these ratings, and there's a reason we don't jump the gun on some of these guys, because sometimes in a small sample size sport, we get fooled a little bit. Again, I don't think that's going to happen with Bo Nix. I think the up arrow is still on him to settle in as a tier 3 quarterback, whereas right now, I want to say I have him as the highest rated tier 4 quarterback, and that tier 4 is split up into kind of bridge starters and then younger quarterbacks that are trending towards settling in at a higher tier. So I think it's a fair spot for Bo Nix. You guys will have to let me know what you think about that ranking. And then another thing with Bo Nix is they are able to at least lean into him a little bit as a designed rush threat. He and this Broncos offense get a solid boost from that. It's nothing crazy. He had 71 yards on design carries last year, 43 charted designed runs, which it's unfortunate I can't pull out kneel downs and QB sneaks from that to really see the efficiency of the designed runs. Looking at you, PFF, would love to be able to filter those out. But needless to say, they got a little bit of production from him as an actual QB keeper. But they do run that type of stuff. And even if you're forcing defensive ends to stay honest on read options, out of shotgun runs, and tapping into him as a play action boot threat as well, where he does have enough athleticism where that backside end has to respect him keeping that ball and wheeling out back the other way. You do create some numbers advantages with a Bo Nix, even if it's certainly not to the degree of, your top guys in the league in that sense. Guys like Jalen Hurts and Lamar and Josh Allen, but ranks inside the top 10 for QB run impact. Don't feel the need to spend too much time on Jarrett Stidham as the backup here. He's started some games in the league. He showed some flashes at the end of the 2023 season with the Raiders when their QB room was a mess. Maybe year 2 in this Sean Payton offense, Jarrett Stidham could surprise a little bit, maybe be something like a Jake Browning-esque backup, which could be solid. But I don't think we're quite there yet with Jarrett Stidham. Sam Ehlinger, on the other hand, I don't have any energy for. I don't think he can play the position. Probably would have gone with another option as my QB3 if I were Denver there, to be honest. But Sean Payton's a wizard. Maybe he can figure something out. So again, 19th for overall ranking at quarterback here, a very solid ranking for the Broncos and trending at least slightly upwards, with the upside to be a top 10 quarterback being, on the shelf for now. Let's see him settle in as a surefire kind of franchise QB tier 3 quarterback for now, and then we can, maybe see how things go and discuss other conversations in the future in terms of him being anything more than that. But as we move forward and discuss the receiving targets here in Denver, they've made some additions here, some upgrades to, again, hopefully make the structure of this offense even better for Bo Nix for this year and beyond. So as far as the offseason changes go at wide receiver, I say they got slightly upgraded. Not really any losses there. Josh Reynolds was okay, but only played 16% of snaps last year. And then my guy, little Jordan Humphrey, who has a fun role in this offense that they don't have a huge need for with other guys that can play that big slot that he plays. They let him go as well. He got picked up by the Giants, I think, but he did play a good bit for them last year. Not a huge loss for them, though, in my opinion. And then they draft Pat Bryant, who we'll talk about, but catches everything. They take him in the third round out of Illinois. That, to me, is enough to say slightly upgraded with this wide receiver room, at least for now, as he competes for a starting job. But then at tight end, this was kind of their big move on offense, was to go and get Evan Ingram, who was released by the Jags, and that new regime. Someone that has struggled to stay healthy last year and throughout his career, but if healthy, that is a really nice big addition for this Broncos team. Excited to break him down. And then, as Sean Payton likes to do, he gets his project former basketball player tight end in Caleb Lohner out of Utah, trying to recreate Jimmy Graham with that pick. We'll see if he can do it. But let's break this group down. It is a group that is certainly heading in the right direction, but still some work to do before we call this more of a true difference-making unit. But they are a very solid to good group. They rank with a B- grade for me in weaponry, ranking 19th to 22nd. And at the forefront of this is their number one wide receiver, who just got a very nice contract extension in Courtland Sutton. He gets about $23 million AAV. I think that is spot on for someone that is one of the better, number 2 caliber wide receivers in the league. He is this team's number one. He plays the quote unquote number 1 X wide receiver role in this team. There's different ways to assess that term, number 1 wide receiver. I think Courtland Sutton, at the end of the day, is one of those receivers who, in an ideal situation, would probably be your second best player, but is still good enough that if everybody else can be really good in their spots and in their roles, maybe offering some different skill sets that someone like Courtland Sutton, as more of a traditional, bigger-bodied X wide receiver, can't do, then if everybody can fill into those roles, well, then you can be just fine with Courtland Sutton as your number 1 wide receiver. So that's kind of the starting point with this Broncos group of weapons. I do love Courtland Sutton, though. I do think he's underrated, and it was great to see him finally get that contract extension. You know, he's been one of these guys getting jersey swap posts on Twitter and in these, theoretical trade discussions. What does Sean Payton in this new regime really think about him? A guy that's never really had that massive blow up season or anything like that. But he's also dealt with a lot of injuries. And let's face it, the quarterback play in Denver here has been something maybe just short of a nightmare or just a full-on nightmare. And I don't think it's a coincidence that as soon as he gets a capable Bo Nix in here, he has a career year in receptions, 86, a career high, yards, a career high, with 1,156 yards. This is including the playoffs where he was very good against Buffalo. And then he finishes with 8 touchdowns, not a career high. He had a career high in the previous season, 2023, with 10 touchdowns. But in the last 2 years, he has doubled his career touchdown total. He's got 32 in his 7-year career. 18 of those came in the last 2 years. But yeah, the Sean Payton era has certainly been good for Courtland Sutton, and now getting fully rewarded, financially speaking, and recognized as such. And I think he continues to produce. I think he absolutely will be this team's leading target getter, leading yardage getter, this team's number 1 wide receiver, and probably repeat somewhat similar numbers. Clear 1,000 yards, close to 10 touchdowns. He's been at exactly a 57% contested catch win rate the last 2 years, 57.1 to be exact. He's just hyper consistent as one of the better true X wide receivers in the league, running go balls, posts, back shoulder comebacks where that chemistry on those throws should only get better with him and Bo Nix. Hitch routes, slants. That's about it. And that's all they ask him to do, and he's very good at it. So it's a good starting point there for sure. even if he isn't the most dynamic, ideal number one wide receiver, if you're looking to be one of the most difference-making groups of weapons in the league. But they do have some other pieces that could certainly fill in to be more complementary of Courtland Sutton than what they got last year. They really didn't have too much in terms of options and reliability after Courtland Sutton. I think that could change this year. And I actually want to go to Evan Ingram next. I'm very excited to see Evan Ingram in this offense. Calling him a tight end just doesn't quite feel right for me. We've seen this role in this offense with a lot of the stuff they did with Devon Vele last year, with Lil Jordan Humphrey. That's the role that Evan Ingram is going to mostly play in this offense. Now, Ingram does technically bring a little bit more size and experience blocking in line. That doesn't mean he's any good at it. He is nothing short of a liability when he is asked to put his hand in the dirt as your Y tight end in line, digging out defensive ends. And because of that, and the fact that we know this offense has a role for that big slot going all the way back to the Marquise Colston, Jimmy Graham days with receivers roughly in this mold of an Evan Ingram, calling Evan Ingram a tight end just doesn't quite feel right for me. And Jimmy Graham himself felt that way. Remember, he had disputes with the NFLPA about like, hey, I'm a receiver. My franchise tag should be at the receiver money, not as a tight end. We've seen Evan Ingram have seasons where he plays 80 to 85% of his snaps as a receiver. And I think here in Denver, he might even set a career high in that mark. I think we could see 90% of his snaps are as a either slot wide receiver or as that ISO'd one wide receiver side of a 3-by-1 look, which puts defenses in a bind. You have to basically key off if you're in man coverage or zone coverage if you're going to treat him like a tight end, because if you're running man, you're going to have your three corners in a nickel formation go to the 3 wide receiver side, and then you're either going to see a safety or a linebacker go out and try to man up Evan Ingram. So you're either forcing the defense to declare what they want to run or end up in a mismatch advantage with safeties and linebackers having to cover your receivers on the other side. So Sean Payton will absolutely do that with Evan Ingram. And then just putting him in the slot, having him stretch the seam, putting him in as kind of a wing tight end where he may or may not have his hand in the dirt, but that's where you're going to get him matched up more on like weak side backers and safeties on the perimeter of a lot of these runs. That's what he's here to do. He's not here to be a tight end. You can list him as a tight end as you want. I'm curious to see and look back on just how many snaps he actually plays as an inline tight end. Doug Peterson did have him putting his hand in the dirt, playing more actual tight end about 30 to 40% of the time. That's the absolute most I think we would see from him here now in Denver. But outside of usage, I mean, true mismatch problem, 6'3", 6'4" on a good day, 240 pounds, very fast player, like legit speed in the 4.4s. Takes a little bit longer for him to build it up, but it's just tough for linebackers to keep with him. And then he's too big for so many safeties and slot corners especially to deal with him. So Sean Payton knows how to use these guys if he can stay healthy, which I think is the biggest if for Evan Ingram. He was banged up last year and all throughout his career, going all the way back to the beginning of it. He's just a guy that his body does tend to betray him. So that's why he got released in Jacksonville. He is getting up there in age. He's 32 years old now. Now, he still was hyper productive when he did play the last 2 years in Jacksonville. So I don't think we've seen physical regression from him quite yet, not to any sort of substantial degree. But he's got to be able to stay on the field so that he can really carve out a heavy role in this offense. And if he's healthy for all 18 games, I actually think there is a chance that he leads this team, at least in receptions, maybe yards, but could actually be like, you talk about like fantasy football. I think Evan Ingram has massive like league-winning ability to be a top 3 or 4 tight end inside this offense because he's not really a tight end. He's a wide receiver that you get to play at the tight end spot in your fantasy league. So he's absolutely someone that I'm going to be targeting, whether that's in your underdog best ball leagues, your home leagues, usually goes around the 10th round. I love him as just to go true hard fantasy advice here. If you fill out your receivers, your running backs, maybe not your quarterback, depending if you're in a 2 QB league or not, I love using that 9th round or even back into the 8th to just grab Evan Ingram as your number 1 tight end It's a little bit more risky because of the durability stuff, but I definitely think he can outperform being tight end 8, which is where he's getting drafted right now. Now back to real life football and reality here. Do I think he's a top 8 tight end in the NFL? That's more borderline, especially if you want to factor in blocking and stuff. But I do like the addition for Denver, and I think he is the biggest wild card for this offense, honestly, is can he be a second option in this passing game that can not just take pressure off of Courtland Sutton, but just give you someone else to have efficient, schemed up offense for Bo Nix on, have a mismatch problem, have that difference-making player in there that they just were missing outside of Courtland Sutton last year. Now, he's not their only hope there. I think he's just their biggest hope. Marvin Mims was really interesting with what he did at the end of last season. At the beginning of the year, he was a gadget player, a returner, getting some bubble screens, and that was about it. But as the season went on, he kind of slowly, steadily got more and more down the field targets and showed that he can be more than just a design touch guy, where he was awesome, just catching those bubble screens, being like we talked about with Sean Payton's scheme, that quick passing game, the screen game to the perimeter as an extension of your run game. He contributed that. You could throw the ball to him in the flat, and he could on first down get you 6-7 yards pretty damn consistently, and sometimes even more than that. But going back to his college tape, like this dude had some of that Tyler Lockett, Jaden Reed-esque ability as a smaller wide receiver to really track the ball well and come down with some really impressive, spectacular catches towards the sideline, over the shoulder, through traffic. And we saw some flashes of that last year. Not a ton, but we definitely saw some of those impact plays. The giant touchdown up the seam against Cleveland, couple of big down the field catches against Cincinnati specifically. He showed that he can do it. And, he's a second round pick that did have a lot of buzz coming out. It really wasn't until the end of last season that he really emerged. And he's got other guys to kind of edge out for some of those vertical targets. Obviously Courtland Sutton, but we'll talk about Troy Franklin and even Pat Bryant competing for some of those looks. So he's going to have to continue to earn those opportunities. It makes it a little bit harder to predict that he emerges as this team's kind of number 2 wide receiver outside of the Evan Ingram conversation. But I do think in terms of the guys that were playing on this team last year, who I saw the most talent from to be able to do that, I would say it's Marvin Mims. So if I had to bet on one of these other guys to step up, it would be him. It's just more of a question mark on if he's going to, for one reason or another, earn those targets and start to produce at any sort of consistent level. And then you have Troy Franklin, who he definitely brought the vertical threat skill set with him into the league. He's got good, not great speed. I like his route running. He's slippery after the catch as well. He's pretty redundant with Marvin Mims for the most part. I just think Mims has a little bit more juice and much better hands. What we saw last year was these guys kind of taking turns in terms of getting those opportunities. So do we see Sean Payton actually pick one of these guys and stick with them so that they can maybe have more of that consistent develop within this offense? Or does he continue to have that rotation? That's kind of how I'm looking at this. But again, I do think Marvin Mims is just the more talented player in this role. And then Troy Franklin, if he can ultimately settle in as a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, someone that played with Bo Nix in college, has some of that chemistry, can make splash plays for you, even if you're going to get some frustrating drops and inconsistencies from him. That would be probably a more realistic, likely outcome for Troy Franklin. But I did, at least for now, put him up on the graphic there as one of the starters, but definitely with the rotational tag and with the caveat of there's a world where he's this team's wide receiver 5 this year. I'm well aware of that, because you do have Devon Vele, who is actually listed as a starter right now. That's where I'm very curious to see how that plays out, once we actually get to the season here. Vele did play a good bit last season, certainly was a starter for this team as a 7th round pick last year. But it was in that big slot role that I just feel so confident saying that Evan Ingram is going to take the majority of that. I think that will take a lot of snaps away from a Devon Vele and put him in more of a, honestly, backup to Evan Ingram type of role, and someone that, will play if you go 2x2 and you want two big slot wide receivers or a bunch formation with two bigger wideouts. Like, he's still going to get in the mix as a part of the rotation, but do I think he plays, 35 snaps a game like he was last season? No, I really am not projecting that. I would be curious to hear from Broncos fans if I'm off base with that role, or if you agree that that's kind of the way we will see it, even if right now the technical listed depth chart is going to show Devon Vele as a starter. But also Pat Bryant comes in here, your third round pick out of Illinois, who I'm really excited to see here. And other than Marvin Mims, he is the other guy that I think has legitimate upside in this wide receiver room to carve out an impact role with this team. And I'm especially excited after we just kind of broke out all the rest of these guys down and their role within this offense. There's still some kind of missing cracks to be filled in. And I think Pat Bryant's skill set, when you look at it that way, you can really understand this draft pick. And I'll stick with that analogy, kind of the cracks that he's going to be able to fill back in within this offense, right? You got Courtland Sutton, who's plug and play as your outside guy. Marvin Mims is going to play inside and out a lot of time as your gadget guy from the slot, but he'll step outside and be a vertical threat from the outside as well. Troy Franklin very much in that role as well. And then Evan Ingram and Devon Vele are true slot weapons. So you're going to have some openings both inside and out. If you're in 3 wide receiver, 11 personnel packages, and Mims is going to be in the slot, you don't really want Vele out there. Troy Franklin's not really ideal right now out there, I don't think, unless he really takes a step forward. Pat Bryant is, in so many ways, another Courtland Sutton. Not the fastest guy, but the dude catches everything. My favorite trait about him, I talked about this in my wide receiver rankings video where he did crack my top 15 at a time where nobody was talking about him. So this was a bit of a draft win for me as someone that I really like Pat Bryant early in the process. But he has a little bit of that A.J. Brown in him. He's not quite as big. Obviously, he's not A.J. Brown. But when you watch A.J. Brown and he gets these downfield targets and DBs are kind of, trying to do what DBs do and throw hands into his hip and elbows at him at the catch point and trying to disturb the receiver through, contact that usually goes uncalled. Let's face it. But A.J. Brown is a trait where, DBs try to throw him off his spot, and he's just so strong through that contact that he's unfazed, and it allows him to stay in perfect position and so firm through the catch. Pat Bryant has that trait. Even if he's only listed at 208, you watch this guy play, and his raw play strength is phenomenal for this position. And that shows up, by the way, after the catch as a run blocker as well. Those are big assets that he brings to the table. But he kind of has this black hole effect as a wide receiver where the ball's in his area, he's going to find a way to, reel that ball in. So lining up on the outside, opposite of Courtland Sutton, who's obviously going to be the primary read along with Evan Ingram most of the time, but someone just from the outside that can have a simplified role right away, occasionally running go balls, but mostly back shoulder comebacks where you hope he can develop that chemistry with Bo Nix, where if he doesn't like what he sees from Courtland Sutton and Evan Ingram, again, we can continue to see some of that further development from Bo Nix with more playmakers here, like a Pat Bryant, to develop some more of those full field progressions where he's going 1 to Sutton, 2 to Ingram quickly, and then instead of necessarily getting into scramble drill, he can say, it's okay, I have Pat Bryant working against, a number 2 or number 3 cornerback that's going to be matched up on Pat Bryant. I like that matchup as well. Or the backside digs that Pat Bryant ran really well at Illinois. He can absolutely be a part of the backside progressions in this offense that ran a lot of deep dig routes. I think he's going to do that very, very well. Running slants, let's say you're going against the Jets and it's 3rd and 3 and you need to have a slant for a first down. Well, would you rather do that with Courtland Sutton being covered by Sauce Gardner or to Pat Bryant being covered by Brandon Stevens? I think we're going Pat Bryant. on that matchup. So he's there for those types of, matchup opportunities. And then he also totally, with that play strength aspect, can evolve as a big slot for this team. If you want to put Marvin Mims or even a Troy Franklin, if he develops on the outside, as more of your kind of speed flanker type of role. Well, sorry, Devon Vele, but Pat Bryant is a super, talented dude for that big slot role. He's a great run blocker, a menace to bring down after the catch, and super tough making those challenging catches over the middle of the field. So he plugs in really, really nicely here. He's going to have to, earn the trust within this offense, earn Sean Payton's trust, earn Bo Nix's trust, and prove that he is a good player coming out of the college ranks. But the skill set's really fun, and I think he can turn into one of the more useful kind of wide receiver 2.5s in the league. I don't know that he has the juice to be like one of the better number 2 wide receivers in the league, but let's say you always have that like impact receiving tight end with a Cortland Sutton. I think Pat Bryant is the third piece there. Could be really healthy for this team. So I love that addition. And then you're probably talking about a competition for wide receiver 6 between Trent Sherfield, who's a good run blocker and a good special teamer. He's bounced around the league for good reason. And then A.T. Perry, who does still have some fascinating traits. He's flashed when he's played, but he's dealt with injuries. Kind of an interesting guy coming out of college, a savvy, quick-footed, taller wide receiver with some moments of good ball skills. He's kind of followed this New Orleans staff over. He started in New Orleans. But probably only room for one of those two guys. So A.T. Perry's going to have a good camp to make it over Sherfield. But then you get into your actual tight ends. Adam Troutman isn't going to get a ton of targets here, as he didn't last season. Just 21 targets, playing all 18 games for this team last year. He's a sure-handed possession tight end that can make some impressive catches in traffic at times and be solid after the catch. He is a low-end starting possession tight end, nothing too crazy there, but he plays that role within this offense, and he is very much a starter on this team. It's just, if we're talking about pass-catching weapons here, I didn't feel the need to really highlight him. And then you have lower investment guys duking it out for spots there. Nate Atkins kind of earned the tight end 2 job last year. This is his 3rd year as an undrafted guy out of South Carolina. I'm not going to lie, I'm not terribly familiar with his game. He made some nice catches down the stretch last season. Lucas Kroll showed some flashes in 2023, showed a little athletic twitch on tape. I had the eyeballs on him in last year's deep dive. That one didn't work out, at least to this point in time. And then Caleb Lohner is fascinating. I mean, just 4 career receptions in college. As a 6'7", 6'8", 240-pound basketball player at Utah, but all 4 of those receptions were touchdowns. So we'll see what Sean Payton can get out of him. He's definitely, if you're in a very deep dynasty league, like I'm in some of those, he's a fun piece to stash. Then you have a plethora of receiving backs, the guy that hasn't even been mentioned here yet, that I think Denver and Broncos fans are excited to see him also emerge as a legitimate kind of rare impact receiving running back. There's only a handful of those in the league, but one of those was and still kind of is Alvin Kamara coming out of this offense in New Orleans. And obviously a 2nd-round pick here in RJ Harvey totally falls into that jitterbug human joystick type with a lot of talent as a guy in space with the ball in his hands and explosive juice. He was a good threat for UCF in the receiving game, but probably a little bit underutilized there. And from a pass blocking perspective, he still has a lot to prove. So, he's not entering the league as a bona fide superstar receiving back, but that is certainly the core vision that they, I think are at least expecting to get out of Harvey. Is you think back to Darren Sproles and what Alvin Kamara was with them, with a Mark Ingram, being a legitimate problem out of the backfield, not just in screens and in the dump down game, but actually someone that can maybe develop his route running a little bit more, run angle routes out of the backfield, even line up out wide and cause some of those, things we talked about with the Evan Ingram situation where the defense has to declare whether they want to keep a corner on him in the outside or take a linebacker out of the box and move him all the way out wide, like do actually some of that stuff that Sean Payton likes to do with his backs. A lot of potential to develop in that role in the receiving game there as a second round pick. But you've got a bunch of guys kind of in that mold. Jaleel McLaughlin has some juice catching the ball out of the backfield. Tyler Beatty, Blake Watson as well. Payton has clearly kind of had his eyes on these types of guys, but RJ Harvey was the one he had the conviction to really invest in him. So you imagine he's going to get the vast majority of the running back targets here. J.K. Dobbins might play a little bit, especially early if they need more pass protection help back there. He can still catch dump offs and stuff. And then Audric Estime, probably more of a true backup and goal line role for now. But yeah, a lot of options in this group of weapons. Certainly more potential now moving into Bo Nix's second season for this to be a group that keeps climbing. I don't think this necessarily has top 10 weapons in the NFL potential this season. But could they get up to like 15th and continue to, show that they can make a bigger and bigger impact on this offense? Yeah, absolutely. But let's now switch to the backfield conversation from the run game perspective. And this is where we will take a look at the offseason changes, where you will see RJ Harvey show up as an addition in the backfield for the Broncos, along with J.K. Dobbins. Probably could just reveal those in the future with the weapons and save some time there. I do, by the way, have some plans to slightly move around the order of these conversations in next year's deep dive to help this flow better. We've gotten a lot of good suggestions from you guys, so I appreciate it. That is coming next year. So I guess subscribe so you don't miss the really exciting format changes to the running back conversation in this deep dive series. Anyway, their only loss is Javonte Williams, who I kind of hinted at it earlier, is just not very good. If anybody that watched the Cowboys deep dive knows what I think about Javonte Williams at this stage in his career. So definitely upgraded. Of course, with the additions being second round pick RJ Harvey and veteran J.K. Dobbins, who stays interdivision, played with the Chargers last year. But even if I do say this running back room is upgraded, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to rank out all that well. In fact, I still have them with this running back grade coming damn near at the bottom of the league, ranking 30th to 31st. Now, I will say this before we get into it. If you look back at the Cowboys deep dive, I talked about that running back room that ranked 32nd. And I basically pointed out, look, there's a lot of good running backs in the league. They're pretty easy to acquire. The J.K. Dobbins of the world, for example, who ran for 1,000 yards last year, or just short of it, are pretty much readily available. We can go through a full year's worth of deep dives without me saying basically something along the lines of, this is a truly bad running back room that is going to make it hard for this team to run the football. That's where we ranked Dallas this year, where I'm genuinely concerned if they have the guys to set the floor of their run game. As low as I'm ranking this group, I still think this is better than what they had last year, and it's still at least an adequate combination of NFL runners. And when you are talking about the literal starter from this team last year is Dallas's starter this year in Javonte Williams, I can understand why Broncos fans are excited to have a better running back room. But again, you start stacking this group up against the rest of the league, and you can see how they rank 30th to 31st pretty quickly, especially as we'll start with the RJ Harvey conversation here. I'm just lower on RJ Harvey, and he gets the wild card icon there. This running back room as a whole gets the wild card icon, which is me acknowledging, look, Sean Payton knows a thing or two about football. This was his dude. They spent a second round pick on this guy. There's a lot of upside for him to be right about that and for me to be wrong about that. That doesn't mean I'm going to just completely change my opinion. We've seen Sean Payton miss on draft picks. We've seen all of the game's best coaches and GMs miss on draft picks. I'm going to tell you what my honest opinion about RJ Harvey was as a prospect, and then we'll continue to evaluate that as we move on. But I did think it was a reach, you guys. I thought RJ Harvey was a late third, early fourth round guy. In that scat back role, absolutely. I see the vision there, especially in this offense, where you can hopefully coach him to have more sure hands and develop some of the route running because he has the traits to do it, the instincts out in space. That's what you like about RJ Harvey. That stuff speaks for itself, absolutely. But inside that role, is that, again, just my opinion, is that something you couldn't have found 50 picks later with maybe Trevor Etienne, Byshal Tootin went at the top of the 4th round, Dylan Sampson, Woody Marks, also 4th round picks. That was more the draft cluster that I saw RJ Harvey as a prospect. And like some of those guys, you watch his tape, and I just don't know that he, as a 2nd round pick, has it in him to be like a legit impact consistently as a running back threat, which if I'm spending a 2nd round pick on a guy, that's the type of player I would be looking for. This is a guy that doesn't have a ton of size, and the vision especially was pretty frustrating in my opinion on RJ Harvey, where he just didn't have the balance you look for in terms of knowing when to hit a hole, when it is appropriate to bounce runs outside, because at UCF, frankly, at his level of competition, he was able to just bounce everything outside, and his tape is super fun to watch. But he's also a 6th-year running back coming out of UCF. That's another thing. Like, I don't know, man. I thought it was early. And just because you slap 2nd round pedigree on a guy, as we've seen, a lot of times that doesn't mean he's a true 2nd round talent. We'll see, though. I mean, Sean Payton obviously has earned some benefit of the doubt to see how this goes. And again, I do think the receiving game stuff, while it wasn't always perfect at UCF, I think there's a lot of reason to get excited about him in that phase. But when we talk about the backfield here, I would frankly be really surprised if he is getting a lot of carries here. More than like 5 to 8 a game. I do think they signed J.K. Dobbins because they needed an actual running back with size and vision and an established record of production against NFL level of competition. And that's why they brought him in pretty early in the offseason here after the draft. Now, if I'm dead wrong about RJ Harvey, and this is this year's Bucky Irving, which I think a lot of people are pointing to RJ Harvey and his jitterbug ability and, pointing to the success Bucky Irving had last year. And to be fair, I had the Bucs ranked very low in last year's deep dive rankings as well. And I've had to wear that one on the chest for sure. I've spent a lot of time, saying I wasn't high enough on Bucky Irving and beating myself up about that. But at least to put it in perspective, Bucky was tied for my 9th ranked running back in that draft class. RJ Harvey was tied for 16th here. So, I was a little bit higher on Bucky, and at least Bucky was a junior, a 21-year-old coming out that did it at Oregon compared to a 6-year player at UCF. So it's not all identical there, but I could understand drawing the connection, and I'm prepared with Sean Payton choosing this guy to be wrong about it. But I think you get the point here. I just am not super stoked on this pick and how he's going to contribute to this football team, especially on the ground. Back to the point, though, if he is what Sean Payton thinks he is, then yeah, we do probably see him over the course of the season, like we saw with Bucky Irving, overtake this backfield much more, where we are talking about him being the primary back and then Dobbins maybe getting more of the short yardage carries where you're relying on more of that size and vision a little bit more. From a skill set perspective on Dobbins, the Chargers moved on from him for a reason. He's a guy that is constantly banged up. Unfortunately, I think he should get that injury-prone label on him. Doesn't have a lot of juice when he gets into the second level. He'll get you what's blocked up. He is the opposite of RJ Harvey, where he's not going to take a well-blocked run and bounce it outside. He will fit it up in between the tackles. He's solid at anticipating second-level defenders, where he can occasionally make guys miss in the hole. But even if he does that, he's going to get ran down. He's not going to go too far with it. But he's a stable, efficient NFL runner. I think he's better than what they had in Javonte Williams as their lead back last year. So a nice enough signing for what he is, and especially as you kind of figure out what you might have in RJ Harvey, what kind of workload you want to give him. is this Bucky Irving that they just drafted in RJ Harvey, or is this Ronald Jones? We'll see. They do have very interesting depth. Audric Estime, I think, takes a backseat to J.K. Dobbins, but I do still think he's interesting because Dobbins gets hurt. And if he does, unless RJ Harvey has taken this backfield bull by the horns, I think Estime would fill right into that J.K. Dobbins role. He was okay when he played last year, not a ton of standout production. I do still think he was a value where the Broncos got him last year. And as a Thunder to RJ Harvey's Lightning, if you're going to stick with that, Mark Ingram to Alvin Kamara parallel with these guys, I do still think Estime has potential to kind of win that job over time, but didn't quite show enough. Maybe it was the speed of the game in his rookie season, whatever it was, reading things out was just, things moving a little bit too fast for him, as he is a little bit more of a slower back. But I still liked him as a talented player, and I certainly wouldn't write him off kind of taking the starting Thunder back role, if you will. Jaleel McLaughlin, on the other hand, it's going to be much harder for him because of what they've invested in RJ Harvey. Those receiving targets especially are probably going to mostly get taken away from him and go RJ Harvey's way. But if Harvey is struggling as a runner early, I do think McLaughlin has shown certainly enough that they could pivot quickly and give him the ball in some of those sort of spark plug electric style runs where they're looking for more of a big explosive play, a toss, a wide zone run, screen game, whatever it might be. Get the speed threat out in space. You know what I'm saying? McLaughlin did have 494 yards on 115 carries last year, so he does have some production out there, and he's a good backup plan in case they are wrong on RJ Harvey. And then you get especially challenging to get Tyler Beatty and Blake Watson into the mix. Still guys that were interesting jitterbug types coming out of college. If opportunity were to come their way within this offense, I think they could, handle that role. It's kind of another reason why I was a little bit iffy on the RJ Harvey pick. I felt like they had guys in McLaughlin, Beatty, and Watson that were prepared to step into that role this year, but not to keep banging on the Harvey pick. If they suffer injuries, they are more than insulated enough with guys like Beatty and Watson that could get opportunities there. But this is going to be the lowest ranking position group on this team. The running back room ranks 30th to 31st, even though I think this can still be an adequate group, and they do get the wild card icon there to say that I could absolutely be wrong about RJ Harvey, and he could be something like this year's Bucky Irving. And if that's the case, we are talking about a top 20 to even 15 ranking running back room, and this duo now with Harvey and Dobbins could be really exciting. So I understand why Broncos fans are stoked about it. You trust Sean Payton more than little old YouTube me. I get it. It's just my opinion on it. So we'll see where it goes. But with that, we can now shift this conversation right back into a positive light and talk about this offensive line. This unit was so good last year that they went about this offseason making no changes, so staying neutral on the offensive line from their changes this offseason. But Broncos fans will take that. This group was phenomenal last year. We got the same 5 starters back here. I have this ranked as my 3rd overall offensive line. They rank 3rd in pass blocking, 6th in run blocking. Man, this was a core reason for Bo Nix's success, how this offense was able to still be just inside the top half of the league last year, where they were the 16th ranked offense. And for that reason, I don't think we have to spend too much time with this O-line. It's a familiar unit and a vastly positive conversation. At left tackle, you have Garrett Bowles. Maybe the only negative note I have on this offensive line is that Garrett Bowles is 33 years old already in just his 9th NFL season here. He was super old coming into the league, so he's getting up there, and anytime you get into your, mid-30s there, 33 years old, he'll be 34 heading into next year. At some point, the wheels might fall off, but there certainly was no sign of that last year. He had a career year last year in terms of pass blocking efficiency. I guess another negative note is he did have 16 penalties. That's been, something he he has done throughout his career, especially early in his career. First 3 years of his career, he had 3 straight seasons with double-digit penalties. The last 4 years, he got those into single digits, and now back to 16 last year. But he was a lockdown. I mean, honestly, last year, he was an elite pass-blocking left tackle. Gave up just 23 pressures on the season. That was tied for 5th in the NFL behind just Spencer Brown, who had 22, so 1 more pressure than him. Jordan Mailata allowed 20. Lane Johnson allowed 14. Pays to be Jalen Hurts. And then Tristan Wirfs allowed just 13 in just a stupid good season for Tampa last year. So that was the territory Garrett Bowles was in last season. And he's also a really good run blocker too. So he's, that was a career year for him. I don't know if we're necessarily expecting that level of efficiency. He allowed about 50% more pressures in 2023. But still, we're talking about a top 8 left tackle there in Garrett Bowles. Pretty damn good starting point. Then you got Ben Powers at left guard. He's your weakest link, but if Ben Powers is your weakest link, you're doing just fine. He's a very stable pass protector. He's played a million snaps in the league at this point. He's got adequate play strength and a good mind for the position. Just not the best athlete, so it shows up in run blocking and it shows up as a pass blocker at times. Not able to stay square all the time, but still a adequate starter that he'd be starting on just about every offensive line in the league one way or another. And then at center, Luke Wattenberg has really broken through. I debated whether to put the up arrow on Luke Wattenberg or not. He was a 5th round pick in 2022 that won this starting job in a camp battle with Alex Forsyth last offseason and really didn't look back. He had a couple of losses out the gate. He actually allowed 4 pressures in his first 2 starts against Seattle and Pittsburgh, and then he only allowed 5 the rest of the season. He was second to only Creed Humphrey in pass blocking efficiency last year. So that was his 1 year as a starter, and he's heading into a contract year. He's 6'5", 300 pounds, isn't this insane athlete? Man, it's going to be hard for him to be better than that, I think, but that's crazy production. So if you want to put the up arrow on Luke Wattenberg, I think that's more than fair. I think history would suggest slight regression to the mean from him, but still a very good player, probably, top 10 center or so, if you're being realistic about it. Not a huge impact in the run game, but he was just fine. He was assignment sound. He's got decent feet to get in the right place at the right time. So I don't know, maybe he can bulk up even further and get even better there. He'll be interesting to kind of monitor what his production looks like this. He is, even though this was his first year as a starter, he is also 28 years old. That's another reason I stayed away from putting the up arrow on him, but still should probably be, someone they're looking at if we're halfway through the season and he just isn't allowing pressures like he wasn't last year. Probably going to see a pretty nice contract heading Luke Wattenberg's way. And then you got Quinn Miners, which I have to apologize to Broncos fans. I already did on Twitter. We've had several other deep dives where we've discussed who's the best guard in the NFL. We've entertained Quentin Nelson. We've entertained Chris Lindstrom. We entertained Joe Thuney. I am kicking myself as someone that was banging the drum for Quinn Miners in the draft, that has been in these deep dives for years, applauding what Quinn Miners has been doing for this Broncos team. I understand it's not that big of a deal, but I am really beating myself up about not including Quinn Miners in that discussion. Just total brain fart. This guy absolutely should be in that conversation. And last year probably was the best guard in the NFL. Freak athlete, total dickhead mentality you look for. You pair those two things together, it's a great combo for run blocking. But earlier in his career, he had to, get up to speed with the NFL level, fully understand his assignments, stay technically sound on top of just where he played in college, where he could just lay into dudes constantly and lean and, find himself out of position and still have effective blocks at times. He has paired it all together, the work ethic on top of the crazy traits, just a true diamond in the rough out of Wisconsin Whitewater. He hasn't just worked at, his run blocking technique. He's developed as a pass blocker where he had his ups and downs early in his career. Absolutely, man. All he has to do really is repeat what he did last year, and I think we can talk about Quinn Meinerz as the lone best guard in the NFL. Was voted all-team first pro for his performance last season. And the thing about Quinn Meinerz that we didn't do with those other three guards is I have the up arrow on him because last year was his best career year. He did just get that massive contract extension. He has developed every single year, and until he stops improving his pressure rate, improving the percentage of his negatively graded run blocks, which is like, I guess, the equivalent of, pressures allowed, like eliminating mistakes at the end of the day. Like every single year he has reduced the amount of mistakes that show up on his tape. And until he continues to clean that up and clean that up and clean that up to the point where he's damn near perfect, I'm not going to stop putting the up arrow on him. So Quinn Meinerz, absolute stud. I apologize. I'm trying to get a signed Quinn Meinerz jersey. I would love to showcase that as a part of my jersey collection. Maybe I lost that right by sleeping on him in a few deep dives before, but tough to find a signed Quinn Meinerz jersey. If any Broncos fans have a connection, hit me up. Obviously a superstar, though. I think he has emerged as the best player on this offensive line, and that's saying a lot because Garrett Bowles is really freaking good, and he is a key contributor towards this being our third overall offensive line. And then you got Mike McGlinchey at right tackle. He's been worth what they paid him, especially when you look at what the tackle market is today. He's still a guy that will take his occasional losses because he can be a little awkward at times as a pass blocker. He's got that 6'8" frame. So sometimes guys do get up and under his chest and drive him back a little bit, but he's done a good job to work around that. Whereas he was, more below average as a pass blocker in San Francisco. He's in a different system here, more of a, more typical drop back passing game stuff. I'll say it compared to what he did in San Francisco. He's learned to adapt and he's settled in nicely there. And he's still a really freaking nice run blocker here too. So very good right tackle there in Mike McGlinchey to round out this sensational group. And then not only do they have one of the better starting fives in the league, but their depth is pretty good too. So you got two tackles that I think they can trust, like as far as backup tackles are concerned. And I don't even know who their first guy in would be here. Last year, Mike McGlinchey missed about a month. So they originally went to Alex Palczewski, who I still like. I certainly had him as a draftable player. I liked him out of Illinois, where, he was pretty solid for them, just not a great athlete or anything like that, but good player out of the Big Ten. I thought for sure he'd be a 5th, 6th round pick. But he slips through the cracks. Denver picks him up, and he ends up being their first guy in, and he was okay at right tackle for a couple of weeks, and then halfway through his third start there against the Raiders, he goes down with an ankle sprain, so they have to put in Matt Peart, and he played really well. And that's interesting to me because Peart has a ton of traits opposite of a Palczewski, but started his career with the Giants, and he had the occasional good start, but was mostly bad. The Giants have become infamous for not developing O-line talent. He was a 3rd-round pick, a top 100 pick in 2020, someone I really liked. And maybe I am just stubborn and attached to my old draft takes as a young football analyst, but I had Matt Peart as a late first, early second round grade that year out of UConn. Obviously that has not worked out, but I'm just saying there's I think something there. And when he steps in and plays well, getting much better coaching here, he's only 28 years old. To say I'm at least fascinated in it, I think is fair, with Garrett Bowles being 33 years old. Mike McGlinchey, I don't know if he's going to be around here forever either. Like, he to me is a very interesting, like maybe at least like bridge starting option for them if they do need to find a bridge. So something to keep an eye on at least. And then Alex Palczewski, I think absolutely can be a good backup. And I think he could probably play guard too. Like, I don't see any reason why he couldn't do that, especially because your next best backup offensive lineman, and as you look inside, is Alex Forsythe, who's more of a center. And I think, he was in a competition with Luke Wattenberg, and he's played a little bit here as well. Wattenberg as well missed some time, and Forsythe stepped in and played okay. Not great. He ended up, giving that job back to Wattenberg, of course, but certainly an adequate, backup center option for them as well. And running 8 deep is very good by NFL standards. After that, it's all question marks. I mean, they bring in Calvin Throckmorton, who might have been with this team last year as well. But he's bounced around. I think wasn't he originally drafted by Sean Payton in New Orleans? Am I making that up? But, I'm not as fond of his tape. And then he got a bunch of, Nick Carullo was a 7th round pick last year, hasn't played here, and then undrafted types after that. But I like the 3 depth pieces they have, and obviously like their starting group. So this is the biggest thing that this offense has going for them right now. Let's wrap this all together, though, and discuss where I have this offense ranked. So as they finished, at least by DVOA standards, as the 16th offense last year, I have them now, as we head into the season, as our 13th ranked offense. And very balanced. 14th in passing game, 13th in run game. I love just, kind of making additions, hopefully getting some development from young players, really all around one of the best O-lines in the league, and obviously one of the best offensive coaches in the league as well. And I think they do have potential, especially with maybe me being wrong about RJ Harvey and him being more of an impact rookie on the ground. And then if some of those younger weapons, guys like Pat Bryant and Mims, maybe Troy Franklin, but also can Evan Ingram stay healthy? They definitely had some question marks with the weapons, where if they can be better than we're ranking them there, better than we're ranking them in the backfield, you can see pretty clearly how this could be more of a top 10 offense for Denver this year. But let's flip over and talk about this Broncos defense that, as we talked about earlier, was so good last year. And let's see if they have the pieces here to repeat that. We'll start on the defensive line, where they are mostly running it back with some young additions in the draft. So they draft in the 3rd round Savion Jones, who's kind of a defensive end hybrid type of player. And then they draft Q Robinson, who's kind of a pass rushing specialist out of Alabama in the 4th round. And then their only losses is the 5 games that they got from Baron Browning before they traded him away. So it's more of a footnote than it is a loss. But, adequate mid-round additions there. I don't think enough of those guys to say upgraded on the D-line, but staying neutral at both interior and edge defensive line. Let's break this group down. So I have the Broncos defensive line ranking 11th overall, very balanced here, 11th to 17th for pass rush and 11th to 13th for run defense. They have a really healthy body of different skill sets deployed really well by Vance Joseph here. If there is a knock, it's that they don't necessarily have that go-to number 1 with this group. And they don't really have too much promise to have a guy that can be that for them. The only guy I think you would look to that could be this team's true number 1 would be Nick Bonito. Electric edge rusher. So much so that my pro comp on him coming out of Oklahoma was, and I quote, a literal bottle of lightning. Uncontrolled from a technique and skill standpoint. But you open up that bottle and he is a bolt of lightning flying around that you really struggle to get your hands on. And yes, for those that have seen the Key and Peele skit, that is where I got that analogy from. But Bonito really broke onto the scene in the second half of last season, especially really started to focus and hone his craft a little bit more towards really impacting passing games. And from week 10 onward last year, Nick Bonito was 6th in the NFL among all edge rushers in pass rush win rate. And despite a slower start, he ends up finishing the season with 61 pressures and double-digit sacks, making him, by season's end, one of the more productive edge rushers in the league last year. Now, that obviously makes its impact here. He already gets a stud ranking, an 81 rating for me as a pass rusher. He's a 79 overall rated player with the up arrow on him. And the reason that's lower than the rush rating is his run defense is just not really a factor right now. Still learning how to be more of a 3-down presence for this team. But there's a couple reasons why, even though he was one of the better pass rushers in the league in the second half of the season last year, there's a reason why he's still ranking out as kind of like a quality number 2 caliber rusher. Number one is it's still just a small sample size, just a half season of high-end production. You do see this sometimes from Josh Uche, for example, in a similar skill set. Showed us those flashes and then disappeared from the face of the earth, apparently. So again, we have a process here. We want more established production over time before we really start to crown these guys as some of the best at their craft. So that's a huge part of it. But I also think like there's still quite a bit to be unlocked in terms of developing his pass rush bag. I would love if he could get some bit more power to his game. I still see a guy that wins with that first step. He's gotten better with his hands. And they've really unlocked him as well, like looping inside on all these blitzes and twists, where if you take a John Franklin Myers or a Zach Allen and you blow up the guard and the tackle, I don't know if there is a faster edge rusher in a 5-yard area that is able to dip and accelerate into a lane before the guard is able to work his way over. He is dynamite on all of the blitzes and twists that they run here. So I do think some of that production was helped certainly by Vance Joseph in this system, really throwing the kitchen sink at these offensive lines. But I see a guy with that first step, and I mean, can he become what Hassan Reddick was in his prime for a couple seasons, where not only does he have an elite first step and bend around the corner, there's no doubt that Nick Bonito has that right now, elite. And I don't throw that word around. But can you force tackles to also have to defend a bull rush where they're not always able to set wide? That's going to go a long way towards sustained number 1 edge level production in time for Nick Bonito. So it's a big 4th year for him. He's heading into a contract year, obviously a breakout season last year, but can he follow up the breakout from a developmental player from where he was last year, a developmental player, into a good starter? Can he take another leap this year and maybe be like a super expensive edge rusher for this Broncos team that's peaking at the wrong time for them, where he might, I mean, if he really reaches his potential and he's getting better year in, year out, we are talking about someone that will be justified in asking for $32-33 million a year, something like that. So he's a big, contract year player this year, one of the biggest. And like I said, they don't really have a true number 1 guy. If he can become that, and then all these other guys are just complementary pieces, that's pretty freaking crazy. But let's continue to go through this group. I think for the most part, we know what most of these guys are. You have Jonathan Cooper, who is maybe the poster boy for the perfect number 2 edge rusher, in that he's a balanced 3-down player, defends the run. He works hard as a rusher. He can win with some finesse, some power, but not dominant traits to give you like consistent production in that sense. He's great as a disciplined cleanup artist as well. If all these other guys are going to force the QB off his spot, he's a great contain rusher to get off blocks and have enough athleticism to finish these sacks. And that's where we did see double-digit sacks from Jonathan Cooper last year. So he's a total rock, eats up a ton of valuable snaps for them at a relatively efficient basis for $15 million a year. And then I want to just keep it with the starters here, and then we'll work into the depth. Zach Allen is an absolute workhorse. Just got a crazy big contract, $29 million a year for Zach Allen. Definitely an eye-opener. I don't know that his efficiency as a rusher would tell you that he is as good on a per snap basis as other interior players making that much money, which right now, like Chris Jones and Dexter Lawrence, are those the only other guys getting north of 27 on the edge? I mean, Quinnen maybe got that if he's been extended, but that's rare territory in terms of paydays. Total pressures and sack numbers, like he had crazy production, but that's also because he plays more than pretty much anybody else. If you just take out playoffs, because some teams are playing more games than others, he was the only player in the NFL that had more than 900 snaps, hell, more than 859 snaps on the interior. That was Osa Odigizua was second in the NFL for interior D linemen and snaps played at 859. Think about this for a second. Zach Allen played 105 snaps more than that, and he missed a game. So, no, his efficiency isn't that of a $29 million a year player. It's more of like a $22 million guy, like a really nice number 2 guy for a defensive line. I think that's fair for like his talent, but that's also something you can't take away from him. The fact that you have a defensive lineman that is as conditioned as he is, that is the leader that he is, one of the elite work ethic guys in the league, also a perfect scheme fit because he's a former edge guy that's learned how to play defensive tackle. So for all these twists and stunts, he's perfect. He can be both the disruptor, where he can blow up guys for a Nick Bonito or Jonathan Cooper to loop in behind him, or vice versa. If you want to line John Franklin Myers up next to him and have John Franklin Myers blow guys up, Allen has the twitch and athleticism for an interior player to be the loop artist. So he's perfect for this system, perfect for this locker room. And even if he's not bringing $29 million value on a pass rushing efficiency basis, or even as a run defender where, you know, he is still a little bit lighter, he can get blown off the ball as a run defender as well. He's certainly crafty to work his way in the backfield and shoot gaps as a 3-tech. I'm not saying he doesn't bring value as a run defender, but I wouldn't describe him as even a top 10 run defending interior player. Overall, we're talking about, I don't know, probably the 12th to 15th best interior D lineman in the league. I'd have to really add it all up, but you factor in all the other stuff: availability, stamina, scheme fit, leadership. That's where you get the $29 million from. So I don't hate it for Denver. I don't think you want to throw a ton of those contracts around. You start to run out of money if you do that, but you pick your spots. I think it's a good spot to go. And then you have John Franklin Myers. I mean, that's another reason you can pay Zach Allen $29 million is because you stole John Franklin Myers for like $5 million from the Jets. Horrible move for the Jets to let him go. We saw that defensive line was night and day without him, and this Broncos defensive line was night and day with him. He is a difference-making hybrid defensive end. Plays a little bit of edge, but mostly 4-eye, 3-tech for this team. He shoots gaps as a run defender, and that's all they really ask for him. They don't really ask him to take on double teams and be this reliable source there, but he can make an impact getting into the backfield and disrupting runs. But especially as a pass rusher, for all the blitzes and stunts they run, first and foremost, he's a problem. A 285-pound sledgehammer that can just detonate, you know, a double team combo block working against a stunt. Opens up so many rush lanes for all these other guys to be loopers, blitzing linebackers, you name it. And he can win one-on-one as a rusher himself. He's got that power element, of course. He's got a couple different rush moves that he can go to. On a per-snap basis, you could actually make an argument that John Franklin Myers is this team's best pass rusher right now, at least for the full season. Nick Bonito in the second half was for them. But special pickup. I don't know if they can afford all these guys, right? Franklin Myers and Bonito are both heading into the last year of their deals here. But the fact that they have all these guys here right now is awesome. And then DJ Jones brings the balance to the defensive tackle group. If both Allen and Franklin Myers, let's face it, these guys aren't like traditional defensive tackles. Zach Allen has turned into more of that in time, but Franklin Myers certainly isn't. DJ Jones is a very steady, two-gapping defensive tackle. He can play the nose. He's okay at it. He can rush the passer a little bit. Very solid player. No complaints there as the 5th best member of this really starting group. And all 5 of these guys are starters. Like I said in the scheme breakdown, this team does actually run base defense, the 5th most in the league, so about 27% of the time you're in a base 3-4 front. And then they also will get all these guys out there for pass rushing snaps. They'll run 5-1 penny fronts with just one linebacker out there on the field. or you'll be talking about early down nickel where John Franklin Myers isn't out there with DJ Jones out there, and then later down nickel 4-2 looks or 2-4 looks. Jones comes off the field, Franklin Myers comes in. So all these guys get starting playing time, all used so well for their skill sets. As a unit, this is absolutely a difference-making group. And then you do have some depth just to get these guys breathers. Jonah Ellis, still a very fun year 2 player here. I was a huge fan of Jonah Ellis coming out, and I'm excited to see what year 2 can look like for him. He mostly just showed us flashes last season. He ends up with 20 pressures, 6 sacks. Still very young, though. Was just a big fan of his pass rushing prowess coming out of Utah with athletic ability and just a ton of craft in his game. You talk about a pass rushing bag of different moves that he can use to beat guys. He's got it. So I do think he has certainly potential to be like a really nice number 3 quite easily. But I think he even has potential to be more than that. Not that they need that here necessarily, but a very interesting backup to have there. And then the other guy that'll probably play this year is Dondre Tillman, who is maybe the most sneaky, relative impact player that we'll talk about in this series. Just complete no-name out of the school of IUP, which is Indiana of Pennsylvania. I didn't even know that existed, frankly. But he is a 3-time UFL/USFL champion. This dude spent 3 years in the former USFL and then the UFL. At least that's what his Wikipedia says. I guess the Birmingham Stallions have won all 3 championships in that league. Is that true? Not this year, I don't think. I think the DC Defenders won this year. I'm sorry, I'm not up to date on my UFL status. But anyway, ends up making this team last year out of the UFL and carved out a role here, man. Ended up playing about 20 snaps a game by season's end and just kind of showed up playing both pass rush downs and run defense downs. 15 defensive stops, 22 pressures, 5 sacks. They found something in this guy. Maybe he has even further upside than this. I cannot act like I'm terribly familiar with his game. But hey, good for him. And clearly he's a part of this rotation here. He's listed as, a member of the second team off the edge, ahead of Q Robinson, their 4th round pick here. And I think that probably stays that way, knowing what we know about Q Robinson, where he's a project coming out. He hardly played in his 5-year career, finally got out there for some pass rush snaps in that 5th season and was like unbelievably efficient on a per snap basis as a pass rusher and kind of showed a little bit of everything, showed some traits. So they're betting on a guy that played a lot of special teams that has the tools to work with and develop, but I do not think we see a lot of him in his rookie season. And that's probably the 5 edge players you go with there. And then you go to your interior D-line depth. It's Malcolm Roach, who's a very balanced backup defensive tackle. I think he's one of the better DTs you could bring off the bench. A little bit undersized, but can do a little bit of everything. They signed him to a nice deal to be that for them, and he's delivered there. I like Malcolm Roach a lot for what he is. He frankly would be in the mix for a starting role on some teams, but really good spot for him here to come in fresh and make an impact. Savion Jones gets brought in here. I think they see the writing on the wall with these contracts. We're probably going to have to pay Benito. Probably not going to be able to afford John Franklin Myers. We need to start grooming someone for that role. And that's, Savion Jones in that role makes all the sense in the world. That's basically all he did at LSU as a 6'5", 285-pound dude that can just smash. Has to learn all of the technique and skill required to play this position. But again, groom him for a year, get him the occasional snaps in a backup role behind JFM makes a ton of sense. And then if you have to go one more deeper than that, probably talking about Ioma Uwazurike, who was a talented player coming out of school. He's had a gambling suspension, but he's been solid in run defense when he's played, so you probably keep him as emergency run defense contributions. and those are probably your 11 guys pretty clearly. Jordan Jackson did play last year, did not play well. I liked him as an interesting flyer coming out of Air Force, but it hasn't been there for him, unfortunately. But yeah, really good defensive line. You don't necessarily have the takeover game, alpha, elite impacts on this D-line, but the unit together is really, really good. And they all play so well within this system, and these skill sets pair off each other really, really well. So that's a good start for this defense. Let's now talk about this new look linebacking core, frankly. So definitely some offseason changes here. Cody Barton was their core starter last year. He leaves and gets a pretty solid contract with the Titans. That's a loss. He played well for this group last year. And then they're kind of, I would say they're rolling the dice with these linebackers. Dre Greenlaw, who they bring over from San Francisco, super talented player, but has yet to show he can recover from that Achilles tear he suffered in the Super Bowl in 2023. Alex Singleton is back. He tore his ACL week 3 last year against Denver. That was a blow to this linebacking core. And then Drew Sanders also, I can't remember if he was an Achilles or an ACL. I think he was an Achilles early last offseason, and then he got back out there for spot snaps at the very end of the year. So they've got really their 3 core linebackers are all injury questions here with the linebackers, but all talented players one way or another. And they're hoping that, this group can be an upgrade for them. I think that's fair. And I did say upgraded at linebacker. I like this approach, even if it is a little bit risky here. But with that risk, you do see that wild card icon attached to this linebacker unit. But I think things can work out for them. Each of these individual injury questions are not terrible concerns, I don't think. So let's actually start with Dre Greenlaw. They give him a pretty nice free agent contract that came at a reduced rate relative to his talents because of the Achilles injury that he's been trying to recover from. He battled back to get on the field for them late last season in San Francisco. He tore his Achilles in the Super Bowl in 2023, so obviously in February. And he wasn't really able to go. Kind of shuts it down, gets ready for free agency, and by all accounts, I think he is poised to be healthy and back to his old self, which would be extraordinary. If they can get Dre Greenlaw in his prime, bringing him in here for $11, $12 million a year is about what they paid him. That's a steal. He was for a couple of years there in San Francisco in the conversation for who the best LB2 in the league was, playing next to Fred Warner, but really only as an LB2 because he was playing next to Fred Warner. Nobody's going to be the LB1 next to Fred Warner in this league. So this is the first time really since Dre Greenlaw has fully broken out as that really good player that we're going to get to see him, with a chance to be the best linebacker on his team. It's a good signing. I like the risk. He's now had a lot of time to kind of recover. He's only 28 years old. So again, pretty optimistic about this signing and he's a super balanced player as well. Defends the run. He's got balanced size. He's an instinctive cover player. He's got speed. But not everybody does recover from an Achilles tear, especially at a position where that first step is so important. So there's some risk attached to this, but well worth the risk, I think, for the Broncos. And then you have Alex Singleton, who is coming back from an ACL tear. I'm not even seeing him listed as injured. That was a week 3 injury last year, so he's had about 10 months to recover there. By all accounts, he'll be good to go here. So, not everybody comes back, especially for Singleton, who's been around. He's 31 years old, so certainly not a guarantee that he can recover from the ACL injury. Modern medicine is a miracle with many of these surgeries and stuff, and obviously with him not even listed on the PUP or anything right now, as far as I can see, we're good to go there. So everything's pointing up for these guys to come back, and if they can be a fully healthy, best version of themselves, this is definitely a top 10 linebacker unit. I did factor in some of the injury risk here and reduce their ratings a little bit, giving them both those yellow up and down arrows It's just going to be TBD if they can be back to the best version of themselves. But I have them with that ranked as the 12th overall linebacker core, 13th to 18th in coverage, where Alex Singleton, I should probably revisit his skill set in just a second. But run defense, very good, 7th to 14th. But yeah, obviously, those rankings that we have for them could very well go up if these guys are fully healthy. A little bit more on Singleton, though. He is more of a one-dimensional type of linebacker, whereas Greenlaw's got that total balance you look for, but I think that's a really healthy complement. Singleton brings a little more size to the table than Greenlaw does. He plays about 240, if not more. Really good play strength, loves to hit, lacks the speed, though, of a Dre Greenlaw. So struggles to get that range and coverage, and not just speed. He's very stiff. So trying to cover tight ends or running backs out of the backfield, that's not where you want him. But that's why Dre Greenlaw is such a good signing, because he is actually, if healthy, more twitched up and can do some of that stuff for you. Whereas Singleton, you can send on a blitz or even take off the field. If you want to run those 5-1 penny fronts and get all those D linemen we were talking about out there, you can take Singleton off the field on passing downs if you want and just have one linebacker out there. That's an option for this team as well. So very nice duo. These guys play off each other very well. Just hope they can stay healthy. And then Drew Sanders as well. Can he recover? He was a developmental third-round pick in 2022 with really exciting tape, a highly recruited guy that just hadn't played a ton of off-ball linebacker. Bama had him as an edge. Arkansas brings him in as like a half edge, half linebacker. And just like a speed, instincts, traits-based developmental player that just hasn't gotten to play too much here. I was really excited to see what year 2 was going to look like for him last year. And I think he was poised to maybe get that job over a Cody Barton last year, depending on how camp went. But just the devastating injury at the worst of times for him. So he's got an uphill battle to recover now. But at least for the year, I actually like him now, getting a full year to develop and learn behind a couple of vet linebackers here. Singleton especially is not going to be around here forever. And then after that, Dre Greenlaw, I think it was a 3-year deal they gave him. He's going to be up against it to get another contract extension here for sure, let alone see the end of that deal if he does suffer more setbacks with his injury. So I like him as a backup, someone that if he does come in, you're then very intrigued to see what he looks like. But as a developmental piece that, maybe heading into next year at 25 years old, this linebacker position takes a lot of time, especially for a guy like him that hasn't played a lot of it. So he's definitely interesting. And then you got Justin Sternad, who had to start for them last year. Didn't play great necessarily. Missed a lot of tackles, lacks a lot of traits at this position, but now as a backup, they literally survived it last year. So he now settles into a good role there. And then they did pick up Garrett Wallow as well. He's a good athlete. I thought he flashed some good tape like immediately out the gate for the Texans. But hasn't been able to, climb any depth charts for a few years since. So I think he's an interesting pickup too. But yeah, very good linebacker room, but polarizing in terms of where this lands in terms of injury recovery. And I think that's fair. To at least pump the brakes and as we're ranking all these units, factoring in the floor and worst case scenario as well, kind of dinging these guys' ratings a little bit and say, like the process, they still rank as a top 3rd unit in the league, but let's see them get healthy before we're talking about them as, what they could be, which is one of the better linebacker duos in the league this season. Like that's very much in play for this group. But let's go to this secondary, the moment I think Broncos fans have been waiting for. Very fun unit back here, and they added to it at cornerback. They lose Levi Wallace, who was a decent Band-Aid backup for them. Not too much of a loss there, though. Only played 25% of their snaps. And then they draft Jahdae Barron in the first round there. So I said hopefully / slightly upgraded at cornerback. But then at safety, no losses. They sign Talanoa Hufanga, also from the 49ers. So one of the better secondaries in the league last year, only got better. This is going to be a fun conversation to conclude the roster breakdown, at least excluding special teams. But yes, I have this tied for the 2nd best secondary in the league. Sorry, Broncos fans, giving that crown to somebody else. Not that Denver is far behind them, though. And if some of these young corners can develop and continue to develop, there's a world where Denver is the best secondary in the league. But it certainly does help that you have the best, not just cornerback, but secondary player in the league in Patrick Surtain. Defensive player of the year, well deserving. And that's coming from a guy that almost always just defaults to giving it to the most impactful pass rusher. Surtain was so good last year that even I couldn't really argue it. And when you talk about Surtain, it's the system that he plays in is pretty crazy for a corner because they blitz so much, they run so much cover one, they have him shadow, they have him trail number ones. And yeah, when he's in those press man one-on-one situations, he's like taking out number one wide receivers and is more locked down in that sense. And that's obviously impressive. That's great. What's maybe even more impressive to me about Surtain, though, is 0 missed tackles last season in a system that blitzed about as much as anybody, leaving these guys in off coverage, like off zone match situations where you are inevitably going to give up receptions. And that showed up. He had a reception percentage allowed of 73%. That's like below average, but that's all scheme. And for Surtain to so consistently be, even if he's allowing a catch, because the quarterback made the right read, the blitz got picked up, and he was in a compromising situation, he was literally, I can't even say so consistent, he was so perfect in terms of staying on top of the guy he was responsible for and making sure he can get that guy to the ground so that Denver could be allowed to stay so aggressive in their scheme without giving up big plays. It's not exciting. It's not flashy, but I honestly think that could be where his impact was felt the most. 50 combined tackles, 0 missed on the season. And that also contributes to, like, you look at the receptions that he does allow, they're just like underneath targets. He only had 3 weeks on the season where his longest reception allowed was more than 20 yards, and 2 of those 3 were 23 yards. They did have him credited for a 55-yard touchdown allowed in the playoffs against Buffalo. Honestly, didn't go back and watch what happened there. Sometimes he gets credited for a zone bust that wasn't really his fault. That can be iffy, but still, his consistency is literally king. He is the best cornerback in the NFL, and that's where you get to be as a starting point for this Broncos secondary. A true do-it-all alpha corner. And then let's keep it on the outside and then work inside and then towards the safeties. So Riley Moss definitely poised to be this team's CB2 again this year. Up and down season last year, very up to begin, where the first 7 weeks, he looked like one of the better CB2s in the league. I remember his game against Tampa was like one of the better games that a corner had last season. Dealing with those wide receivers, I ended up watching the All-22 on that game, and he was just like lockdown against those receivers in Tampa. It was special stuff. And Denver ended up winning that game 26-7 in Tampa against a good Bucs team. And then it's not that he didn't have other good starts in there as well, but he did have some other starts where he got picked on a little bit more. So it's just a matter of finding that consistency. Last year was his first year as a starter. He dealt with injury in his rookie season, right? But a 3rd-round pick in 2023. And he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the zone IQ, he can press. He's got upside to play like we've seen and be one of the better CB2s in the league. I don't say that lightly. If he can reach that here in year 3, that's obviously going to basically lock this team in as the best secondary in the league. But the fact that, even before he hurt his ankle, I think it was week 12, even before then, he had started to get picked on a little bit more. And then he tried to battle back late in the season and did what he could. But that's the other thing. He's got to stay healthy as well. But I like Riley Moss. Definitely have the up arrow on him. And then if he were to get hurt, you're talking about Chris Abrams-Drain, who did play when Riley Moss got hurt. And he actually played pretty well. Smaller, but very quick twitch corner out of Missouri. a 5th round pick in 2024, so he still has a good bit to prove. But honestly, he played really well, and they hardly missed a beat when Moss was out. So you feel pretty good about him having to step into that role again, and that he could, even have the up arrow on him and continue to get better. I just didn't put it on the screen because I already gave him the eyeballs, and his name is really long. I ran out of room. But he's definitely a fascinating backup. And then Damari Mathis, just super inconsistent, super grabby, and can't tackle, but I still like his traits and physicality. If he had to play as an emergency backup, you might luck into a good game from him. I'm probably done projecting him to get too much better. But then you've got your slot, and that's going to be Jahdae Barron, their 1st round pick. And I know I poo-pooed the RJ Harvey pick, and Broncos fans are going to be like, what the hell? Like, why do you hate the Broncos? They're just were my draft evals, man. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I did find myself pushing back on the crazy hype that Jahdae Barron got in this draft class, where, he got some top 10 buzz, he was one of the most praised players in this draft class. Anybody that followed the draft, I think, would agree with that. Whereas I watched him, I had him as more of a 2nd round guy, as the best slot corner in this draft. And I just didn't agree that he was going to be someone that, like, for a lot of these conversations, whether that was the Raiders in the top 10 or some of these other teams, like the Cardinals, I think was a common draft pick at like 16. Like, I didn't agree that he was worth taking to be an outside corner. Texas asked him to do that in his final season. And watching his tape, I didn't see a guy that moved well enough on the perimeter as a little bit of a shorter corner that projected as a super sticky coverage player on the outside worth a 1st round pick. Like, he was okay out there, but you want to see like a really consistent cover corner on the outside if you're going to spend a 1st round pick on that guy. And that's just what I saw. But the second Denver took him, and you knew he was going to be their starting nickel in this defense, where that was kind of the only missing piece, as you can see here, I immediately was like, yep, I'm going to look like an idiot. Like, he's going to be so good in that role. What I was scared of was someone was going to take him, try to stick him on the outside, and do that stuff. But you put him back in the nickel where his best tape is at Texas, where he is a maniac against the run. His ability to allow you to stay in nickel, but for him to, in many ways be an extension of your linebacker staff, take on blocks, shoot into gaps, be an unbelievable blitzer, tackle efficiently. Like, he heads in as a rookie already very good at that and projects as a potentially elite run defending slot corner. And then in that slot area, he's got the instincts to jump routes underneath. He's got the ball skills. I think he matches up much better against even tight ends and a lot of slot wide receivers than he does on the guys he was going to face on the outside. I think everything that he's good at is as a slot. Really, the only difference there is Denver just valued that with a 1st round pedigree, and I look at more of like what slot corners are paid, where they typically get drafted, and said, more of the traditional mindset of, 2nd round and later, I'll take the best slot corner in the draft. So there's your context for those that will listen to context in the year 2025. I realize that people are going to be throwing, my Jahdae Barron, what was he, CB6 ultimately for me? Because I don't split up slot corners and outside corners. Let's see. Actually, CB7 with a hard 2nd round grade. I realize that's going to blow up in my face. He's going to be a defensive player of the year candidate because of the production he's going to get from this position. If he's lucky enough to have interception opportunities come his way, which is just luck a lot of times, it can be very fluky interceptions. But if there's 3 or 4 tip passes that end up in his hands, or QBs are making bad reads and throwing it right to him, fans will eat that up with this dude. So I'm fully prepared to have to stomach him being my CB7. But I do think it makes sense for this Broncos team as a pick. Is it a bit of a more replaceable position? Are you necessarily maximizing the value you can get out of a first round pick by drafting, premium positions? The top paid slot corners in the league get about $12 million, whereas wide receivers and tackles and edge rushers get 35 to 40. So if you do hit on one of those positions in the first round, it can really change the math of your team construction. Like, those are little nitpicks about taking a slot corner in the first round, but ultimately I get it. And he's going to be an impact for this defense, especially out the gate as a run defender. As a coverage defender, we'll see just how much the instincts and the IQ lead to production for him there. I don't think Jaquan McMillan was a bad coverage slot. He's just really small. So do I think it's a guarantee that they're actually upgrading their coverage in the slot? I think it's probably pretty close to a push. Barron, I think, probably already enters with, more ball skills and zone IQ, whereas McMillan's got some quick twitch and man-to-man ability that I don't know Jahdae Barron is going to have out the gate. But especially in terms of the run defense, I do think that's going to help this team get to third downs even quicker, and you'll feel this defense's presence even more with Barron. So very excited to watch him ultimately. Love the landing spot and the potential for him here. And then obviously you've got depth in that slot spot too. If anything were to happen to Barron, you just go right back to the guy you had last year in Jaquan McMillan and prepare to see a few more missed tackles. But very good depth. Then you go to the safeties, and this is a very good duo. Another area I was very wrong about this Broncos team was Brandon Jones. They clearly saw something deep in that Miami Dolphins tape that I didn't see, and frankly, I just don't know if it was there in Miami, but they bet on this dude, and God, did he break out last year. He was one of the more productive safeties in the NFL. Like, in 4 years at Miami, he had 7 passes defended. He had 9 last season in this Broncos secondary, including 3 interceptions, which doubled his career total. But he got even better against the run. He improved his missed tackle rate by about 50%. So that got better. He was just such a good fit in this Broncos defense. He very much projects now as a very steady, good starting safety. And if he continues to play like he did last season, where last year he was probably a top 10 safety in the league, then we'll have to continue bumping him up in the ratings and giving him more and more praise. It is a volatile position. I don't know that he'll repeat as a top 10 guy at this position necessarily, but he's at least smart enough, has the ball skills, a good enough run defender to feel very good about him, and especially within this system, we know he works just fine. And then they go and get Talanoa Hufanga, because why not? They had to start PJ Locke last year, and they made it work. PJ Locke he's fine. Classic backup option that's okay at everything and not really good at any one thing. Talanoa Hufanga is dropping a pit bull into the middle of this defense and just saying, yeah, well, this unit kind of has everything else. Let's just see what happens if we put this into the mix and start the party with a pit bull in the middle of it. Complete ball hawk. He's inconsistent as all hell in coverage because he's never seen a play fake he doesn't like. He's never seen a dig route he didn't want to collapse down on, a double move he didn't want to try to snap on. So he can get beat, certainly, and sometimes can get beat in compromising situations. And he's not like this unbelievable athlete. He's a good athlete. But this dude will have game-changing interceptions. He will detonate guys over the middle of the field. If you blitz him, he's a ton of fun. One of the more fun safeties to watch in the league, but I think his reckless play style has led to some of these injuries too. So he's pretty injury-prone. He is definitely just some added flavor for this secondary. And, maybe there's a game where a team dots him up on a double move and it costs them big, but that might happen once or twice on the season. Generally speaking, his high-end plays are worth it. You just, you got to live with some of the other stuff on him, but he's a very fun player, fun signing. Maybe a little bit more than I would have given Talanoa Hufanga, but I do get it. And then again, if he gets hurt, you got PJ Locke, had to play for them last year and, didn't really make a ton of plays or help this defense necessarily, but he helped set the floor. Devin Key, probably more special teams help. JL Skinner, the fun player out of Boise State, hasn't really emerged yet here, but still some potential there. And then they did also pick up Sam Franklin Jr. from, I don't know if he was most recently with Carolina, but that's where I remember watching him at, where he had to play for those Matt Rule defenses, and he was okay as a backup too. He's PJ Locke-esque in terms of depth. We'll see if he even makes the team. And then DeLaren Turner-Yell as well, they drafted. He hasn't been able to really earn much playing time at all here. So it's okay depth in the safety group for sure. But that rounds out a very fun secondary. And by the way, not only do they come in tied for second for DB coverage, but they are in the first tier for DB run support. Pat Surtain never misses tackles. Both these safeties on the back ends are plus impacts. Riley Moss is fine, but then Jahdae Barron enters with a good projection and could be an elite impact as a run defender as well. So very, very nice secondary, which rounds out this Broncos defense that, as we put all these pieces together, does rank for me as the 9th ranked defense. No Broncos fans aren't going to love hearing that when they finished higher than that and added some pieces. Defenses can be unstable. New schedule, new players, other teams getting guys back healthy, a lot can change. Still a top 10 defense, very respectable. And if a few things do go right for them, if the linebackers can stay healthy, if Nick Bonito can take a step forward, if those young corners, Riley Moss and Jahdae Barron, can be even better than we've got them ranking heading into the season, like they have different pockets. Even the Vance Joseph ranking, you could argue is a little low. Like, him proving to be an elite coach this year. Like, there's different ways for this to be a top 5 defense again pretty easily. But as they come in as our 7th ranked pass defense and 10th for run defense, there's still some moderate questions that you're hoping this team can, hit some green lights on and go in the right direction towards this being maybe even as good as this league's best defense this year. But let's quickly talk about the special teams here. They do have some roster movement. They say goodbye to Riley Dixon and bring in the punter, Jeremy Crawshaw, out of Florida in the 6th round. With our special teams formula, the Broncos come out very favorable. The 6th ranked special teams, Will Lutz, is a very steady kicker. He ranks 12th, averaged out over the last couple of years. With the adjusted rookie punter grade, Jeremy Crawshaw already ranks 18th. His PFF punter grades were off the charts. So we basically nerf the college grades and apply that to the formula here. And with that, he still came in with a very fair projection there. So, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I did punter analysis. I run out of time to stop short of that. But PFF really likes him. The Broncos do too. So we'll see what the rookie punter can do there. And then Marvin Mims, quietly one of the better return men in the league. He does both kicks and punts. Super shifty dude, sure-handed guy. 0 muffed punts, returning all 27 of their punt returns last year. Average of 15.5. That's fantastic. And he did kick returns for them too. Not quite as much success there, but he's definitely a contributor. So they project very well with the special teams there. And, basically the only question I think is the rookie punter, and we'll see what he can do. But let's get into the team summary. And Denver's really fun here because, the balance of this team is really what starts this team off inside the top 10. 13th on offense, 9th on defense, 6th on special teams. And as we look at their overall strengths, weaknesses, and pivotal factors, the only true weakness on this team is running back. And even there, that's with me having a little bit more of an against the grain opinion that I don't think RJ Harvey is going to be all that good. If they're right about that, they don't have any weaknesses. And even then, if it is a weakness, they can stomach running back as a weakness when it's already a better unit than they had last year where it was a devastating weakness. This is just such a well-balanced team that their floor is just so high. And then they do have some legitimate strengths. The offensive line the secondary, those are critical positions to have strengths at. Their coaching is phenomenal. Their special teams should be phenomenal. And then they also have a bunch of pockets on this team that could get better and raise the upside of this Broncos team, where, kind of like I said in the cold open, like, they are raising a team of cold-blooded killers here that could be like a surprise contending team in the AFC this year. I feel like, again, last year nobody picked this Broncos team to go to the playoffs, and they did it. No one's going to be picking the Broncos to, go to the AFC Championship or even beyond that this year, I don't think. But if they hit some green lights here with some of their wild cards, which to me, like the youth at wide receiver plus Evan Ingram durability, if they can get legitimate explosiveness from that group of weapons, pair that with what we said about RJ Harvey, not just with the running backs, but as a pass catcher in the backfield too. If that linebacker room can stay healthy and be the best version of themselves, that could be, you could go from a bottom half linebacking duo last year to like top 6 this year, like top 8. That could be a really good duo with Singleton and Greenlaw. And then even some other pieces that I didn't quite list as wild cards, but a few other individual pockets with some upside, like Nick Benito on the edge group. Can he take another leap? Those 2 young corners in the secondary, what they can get from those guys is a big deal too. So this team has been so well constructed. They're absolutely heading in the right direction. And we're just seeing the beginning of this Broncos era under Sean Payton's team. But let's conclude by taking a look at this team's schedule and what that might mean towards their win projections for the season. So their own division is certainly not a cakewalk with the Chiefs and the Chargers especially, but the Raiders aren't a pushover. Then they draw the NFC East, which is going to have really 3 challenging games. And then they do get the AFC South, which is a nice gift for this team. Probably in the conversation for the worst division in the league there. And they actually start the season with 2 AFC South opponents. So week 1 against Tennessee, they should be big favorites there. Denver is infamously good at home in September. First start for Cam Ward. That is an unfortunate road trip for him against this defense. And then you got the Colts week 2. So you should be able to get off to a good start, but then things definitely pick up. You got Chargers, Bengals, Eagles. It's kind of a nice little warm up against the AFC South. Hopefully take care of business, start 2-0. And then, that'll be a nice early indicator for where this Broncos team is going to stand. It's not going to be the end all be all. Things lighten up a little bit there. You get back-to-back New York teams, a Raiders game in there, your bye week mixed in with Chiefs and Cowboys and Texans. So you're starting to see some of those harder opponents. But then down the stretch, this team's got to be ready to go. I expect them to be in the mix in this AFC, but you've got an at Washington game, an at Raiders game that they should win, but not going to be, Raiders are not going to be pushovers week 14. They got the Packers, they got the Chiefs again, they got the Chargers week 18 with a Jags game mixed in there at home there. So certainly not the easiest of schedules that we've looked at. Their over-under is 9.5. Their Super Bowl odds place them 10th to 12th in the league. So we're like spot on in terms of consensus rankings on Denver. What honestly stands out to me is division odds plus 280. And they are second there. So they are ahead of the Chargers for division odds. And that's like not that far off of the Chiefs. That's Vegas saying that Denver wins this division about 30% of the time. That at least caught my eye, and it's interesting to me. I don't think that payout is like that good because it's still the Chiefs we're talking about here, but I certainly think Denver is going to be in the mix for this division. We still haven't done the Chiefs deep dive. I do think the Chiefs are a better team, though, obviously, with them ranking higher, but it's a frisky, freaking good, balanced football team with some exciting youth. If they hit some green lights, this team could very well be an 11, 12 win kind of playoff contending type of team. As far as like, would I bet the over under? It's probably a team I'd stay away from just because the schedule is tougher. I think there's probably other teams that I have stronger opinions about. Gun to my head though, the math here has it at 9.6 wins to Vegas's 9.5. You put a gun to my head, I would still slightly lean over that they're a 10-win team. But again, a lot of good teams in the NFL this year. So it's going to be a battle for the Broncos. I'm excited to see where this goes. I feel like they're a fun team to root for because Broncos fans should have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They get doubted. I doubted them last year, certainly. But when, they don't have the super powered quarterback that's like 6 other AFC teams have, like that kind of puts them up against it. But in terms of roster construction and team culture and coaching, like they are positioning themselves very, very well to still compete in this AFC. And I'm excited to see if they can do it. But that's going to do it for today's deep dive. Thank you so much for watching. Please do hit that like button on the way out. Let me know who you think comes in with the number 9 spot in these power rankings. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed. And until the next deep dive, cheers.